Your summer garden can stay green and still stop feeding you. The leaves are there, the vines are standing, and from across the patio, everything may look alive. But then you carry a harvest basket between the containers and notice the truth. A few flowers are lying on the potting mix. A pepper plant is full of leaves but almost empty underneath. A cucumber vine is climbing, yet there is little to pick. By late afternoon, one pot feels dry, even though you watered it that morning. The garden has not disappeared, but the harvest has slowed down. This is where many container gardeners make an understandable mistake. They assume the garden needs more help, so they add more fertilizer, water more often, or start moving pots around every few days. Sometimes those changes help. Sometimes they make the problem harder to read. Because the hottest part of summer asks a different question. Are you growing plants that actually fit this part of the season? Container heat also changes faster than garden bed heat. A dark pot on concrete may absorb strong afternoon sun, while the air around it is already hot. The leaves can still receive enough water for part of the day, then the root zone loses moisture quickly, and the plant begins closing down its most demanding work. Flowering and fruit development are expensive for a plant. Keeping leaves alive is one thing, carrying a crop is another. That is why the harvest may be the first place you notice stress. Before changing anything, spend one full day observing. Check the containers in the morning, again near the hottest part of the afternoon, and once more when the sun is lower. You are learning which pots dry first, which plants recover, and which flowers keep disappearing. That pattern is more useful than treating every container as if it experiences summer the same way. Warm season vegetables are not all the same, and heat-loving does not mean heat-proof. A plant can enjoy warm weather and still drop flowers when the root zone swings from dry to soaked, when the container is too small, when the vine has nowhere to climb, or when fruit is left on the plant too long. So, as we walk through these containers, watch the flowers before you trust the leaves. Every plant has one weakness that can still stand between healthy foliage and a real harvest. Start at the sunniest edge of the patio, where okra often looks completely at home in the middle of summer. The plant grows upright, the leaves catch strong light, and the flower buds appear high on the stems. Okra is one of the clearest examples of a crop that belongs in warm weather. But even here the container matters. A small, light pot can dry too quickly or become unstable as the plant gets taller. Give the roots enough room, make sure excess water can drain, and do not confuse heat tolerance with permission to let the root ball repeatedly turn bone dry. There is another practical detail with tall okra in pots: wind. A plant that is stable in the ground can act like a small sail when its roots are confined to a light container. If your patio is exposed, place the pot where it cannot tip easily. Use a heavier container or add discreet support before a storm teaches the lesson for you. Also, keep an eye on spacing. It is tempting to put several seedlings in one pot because young okra looks narrow. Later, the leaves become much broader and the roots compete for the same limited moisture. A strong plant with room can be easier to manage than a crowded group. The exact number depends on container size and cultivar, so use the mature plant habit, not the seedling size, as your guide. The interesting mistake with okra usually does not show up in the leaves. It may be hanging right in front of you. A pod that looks impressive because it has grown large can quickly become fibrous and tough. The better habit is to check the plant often and harvest pods while they are still young and tender for the way you plan to cook them. With okra, harvesting is part of the growing strategy. When you remove a ready pod, you are not just collecting food, you are also keeping your attention on the rhythm of the plant. Picture a young pod giving with a clean snap while flowers and new buds are still forming above it. That is the kind of summer production we are looking for. Not one dramatic harvest, but a plant moving from flower to pod and back to more flowers. And if you miss a pod and it becomes overmature, do not let that convince you the plant failed. Read the signal, adjust your harvest timing, and keep going. Right beside okra, eggplant teaches a completely different lesson. The leaves are broad, the fruit is glossy, and the plant may look strong enough to carry anything. Then, one fruit gains weight. A branch leans farther every day, and suddenly, a container-grown plant is being pulled to one side. That is why support is better installed early. A stake or cage can look unnecessary when the plant is young. Later, when a heavy fruit is hanging from a branch, the reason becomes obvious. Eggplant also reminds us why steady root conditions matter. In a container, the roots cannot travel across a garden bed looking for cooler, moister soil. Everything the plant has is inside that pot. Water thoroughly when the plant needs it. Check the mix below the surface instead of judging only the top inch, and avoid a cycle of severe drying followed by flooding. Good drainage still matters. The goal is not a permanently soggy pot. The goal is a root zone that does not have to survive a new emergency every afternoon. When the fruit develops, watch the surface and color. Many eggplants are harvested while the skin still looks glossy and the fruit has reached the useful size for that cultivar. Bigger is not automatically better. Leaving every fruit on the plant simply because you want it to become huge can give you a different texture than you expected and adds weight to the branches. Harvest with a clean cut, support the plant before it leans, and look under the leaves while you are there. A quick check for pest activity is easier than waiting until damaged foliage forces you to notice. Now move from the heavy branches of eggplant to the trellis beside it. The next crop changes the shape of the garden because it wants to climb. Armenian cucumber is used much like a cucumber in the kitchen, even though botanically it is more closely related to melon. You do not need a taxonomy lesson to grow it. What matters in a hot container garden is that this vigorous vine can use vertical space well when you give it a strong path upward. Train the vine early instead of waiting until it has crossed 3 other pots. A trellis is not just decoration here. It keeps the growth organized, helps you see developing fruit, and makes harvesting easier. The long, pale green fruits can hang in open view, but that same vigorous growth becomes a problem when the vine is allowed to sprawl across the patio and climb whatever happens to be nearby. Harvest timing matters again. A fruit that remains on the vine far beyond the stage you prefer can become less pleasant for fresh use. Check it regularly, learn the size and texture you like, and pick with intention. This is a good example of why a productive garden is not built by watering and waiting. You have to keep reading the plant. The vine may look unusual beside a regular cucumber, but the next plant is probably already sitting on thousands of summer patios. Hot peppers are familiar, compact, and often treated as if they are nearly indestructible in heat. That is where the phrase heat-loving can become misleading. A pepper plant can stay green while the harvest quietly slows. The clue may be in the flowers. You see blossoms, then a few days later you see them on the soil. Your first reaction may be to feed the plant because you assume it is missing something. But adding fertilizer is not automatically the answer. First, look at the conditions around the roots. Has the pot been drying sharply between waterings? Is the container sitting in reflected afternoon heat? Has the plant been pushed into heavy leafy growth while fruiting remains weak? Do not diagnose from one dropped flower. Plants shed flowers for different reasons. And weather changes. Look for a pattern. Watch new growth, check moisture below the surface, and pay attention to whether the plant recovers overnight after a hard afternoon. The goal is to reduce avoidable stress, not to chase every symptom with a new product. A useful habit is to compare the pepper plant with itself over several days. Are new flowers opening? Are any tiny fruits beginning to swell at the base of spent blossoms? Is the plant setting fruit during cooler stretches and then pausing during a heat spike? That pattern tells you more than a single afternoon inspection. It also prevents unnecessary corrections. If you use shade during unusually intense heat, think of it as a tool, not a permanent identity for the plant. Strong light is still part of pepper growth. The goal is to reduce extreme stress when conditions justify it, not to move every pepper into deep shade for the rest of summer. Observe how the plant responds and adjust gradually. Hot peppers also give you flexible harvest choices. Depending on the variety and how you plan to use them, pods may be picked green or allowed to mature into their final color. That gives the plant a different look from week to week. One pod may be ready now while another is still changing, and that is a useful reminder. A healthy-looking canopy is only half the story. Always look underneath. Leave the pepper foliage for a moment and look at the broad leaves spreading across the next container. Bush zucchini sounds like a small space crop because the word bush feels compact. But compact growth does not mean tiny root requirements. A zucchini plant can build a large leaf canopy, move a great deal of water, and hide fruit close to the base. If the pot is undersized, the plant can become difficult to keep evenly supplied during hot weather. Use a container with enough soil volume for the plant, keep drainage open, and check moisture consistently. A leaf that droops during the hottest part of the day is not always a command to flood the pot immediately. Look at the soil and the plant's recovery. Persistent stress and a dry root zone tell you more than one dramatic afternoon leaf. The shape of the container matters too. A very narrow pot may technically hold enough mix on paper, yet the plant can become top-heavy as leaves spread in every direction. A wider, stable container makes watering and balance easier. Keep the crown visible and avoid burying it under a thick pile of wet mulch. Good airflow around the center helps you inspect flowers and developing fruit. And when you lift those leaves, do it gently. Zucchini stems and leaf stalks can be awkward and sometimes prickly. You do not need to rearrange the whole plant every morning. Create a consistent viewing angle, learn where the female flowers usually appear, and check from the same side. A simple routine reduces the chance of missing fruit without damaging the plant through constant handling. Zucchini also creates one of the funniest container garden mistakes: the invisible fruit that somehow becomes enormous overnight. Of course, it did not truly appear overnight. It was hiding under the leaves while you looked at the top of the plant. Check near the base, gently lift foliage, and harvest at the stage you prefer. For many kitchen uses, younger fruits are tender and easier to handle. Letting one become oversized is not a disaster, but it is a signal that your checking routine needs to improve. If a tiny squash begins forming and then fails to develop, pollination may be part of the story. Do not assume every small fruit will automatically become a harvest. Watch the flowers, watch insect activity, and learn the difference between male and female blossoms if squash is a major crop in your garden. But keep the larger lessons simple. The plant needs enough root space, steady moisture, and regular attention near the crown where the fruits hide. Now, look up. Above the squash leaves, yard-long beans can turn the empty air into growing space. Their vines climb, the stems twist around support, and the pods hang where the harvest is easy to see. In a small patio garden, that change from horizontal to vertical production is valuable. But vertical space only helps when the support is strong, accessible, and placed before the vines become a tangled mass. Guide young vines toward the trellis. Make sure you can still reach both sides for harvest. A support covered in growth may look beautiful, but if it is pressed against a wall or blocked by other containers, you may create a hidden zone where pods become over-mature before you notice them. Yard-long beans are another crop where picking stage affects the eating quality you get. Harvest the pods at the tender stage that suits your cooking. The reward is immediate. Instead of searching through a low tangle of leaves, much of the harvest is hanging in front of you. You can see the long pods, compare their size, and move quickly through the vine. But vertical space does not solve the flower problem we saw in peppers. Below the bean trellis, a sweet pepper plant may be telling its story through blossoms and developing fruit. Sweet peppers deserve their own place on this list because the fruiting demand is different from many small hot peppers. A large bell or blocky sweet pepper puts more weight and volume on each fruit, and the plant still depends on a limited container root zone to support that growth. A sweet pepper plant does not need to look sick before the harvest begins to slow. You may see dark green leaves, fresh growth, and many flowers, yet only a few fruits are developing. Again, do not immediately assume the answer is more fertilizer. Push too hard toward leafy growth, and you may move farther from the harvest you wanted. Check moisture deeper in the pot. If the surface is dry, do not assume the entire root ball is dry. If the surface is wet, do not assume water reached all the roots. Water slowly and thoroughly when needed, let excess drain, and consider mulch where it makes sense in your setup. A simple layer that reduces rapid surface drying can help stabilize the container, but it cannot fix poor drainage or a pot that is far too small. When sweet peppers begin carrying fruit, check branch angles. Heavy fruit can pull stems outward. A simple stake or cage installed before the plant is loaded is much easier than trying to repair a branch after it bends. Harvest decisions also change the rhythm of the plant. Some peppers can be picked green, others may be left to develop color for flavor and use. There is no need to turn that choice into a rigid rule. Grow for the harvest you actually want. A few containers away, Tomatillos introduce a completely different kind of fruiting clue. At first, the papery husks can look almost empty. Then they begin to swell, and suddenly, the plant shows you exactly where fruit is forming. This is a satisfying summer transition. Tomatillos can become large, branching plants, so give them enough room and support. A cage helps keep the plant organized and makes the husks easier to inspect. Pollination is another reason tomatillos deserve special attention. Many gardeners are disappointed after growing a single plant and seeing flowers without a strong fruit set. Depending on the cultivar, tomatillos may benefit from more than one compatible plant for pollination, and growing multiple plants is commonly recommended. That does not mean two plants guarantee a perfect harvest. Weather, pollinator activity, water, and plant health still matter, but it does mean the problem may not be fertilizer or the container mix. Sometimes the plant simply needs a better pollination setup. Because tomatillos can sprawl, container placement matters before the branches are full size. Two plants pushed tightly into a corner may technically be close enough for pollination, yet difficult for you and pollinating insects to move around. Give the plants a reasonable open position. Keep nearby flowers available in the garden when possible, and avoid spraying insecticides casually during bloom. When you see many flowers but few swelling husks, step back and diagnose in layers. First, confirm you have an appropriate pollination setup. Then look at pollinator activity, weather, and plant stress. Only after that should fertilizer become the automatic suspect. This order of thinking saves time because it asks the most crop-specific question first. Watch the husks. As the fruit grows, the husk fills and changes shape. Learn the harvest cue for the cultivar you are growing, instead of waiting for every fruit to look like the tomatillos you once saw at a grocery store. This is the larger pattern of the entire garden. Read the plant in front of you. By now, one idea should be getting clearer. The crop name is only the beginning. Variety matters too, and the next familiar plant proves it. Cherry tomatoes are often included in summer container gardens because smaller fruited tomatoes can behave differently from large slices. But cherry tomato is not a magic phrase that makes a plant immune to hot weather. Choose cultivars with your region and season in mind. Read seed descriptions. Look for information about heat set or performance in warm conditions when that is important in your climate. Local extension recommendations and experienced local growers can be useful because a summer that feels ordinary in one region may be severe in another. The container still needs enough root volume. A cherry tomato may produce small fruit, but the plant itself can become large. Give it a strong cage or trellis, water consistently, and do not wait until the vine is collapsing under its own growth before adding support. Moisture swings can also affect fruit quality, so pay attention to the root zone rather than following a calendar without looking at the pot. Then, look at the clusters. Small green fruits begin to color at different times. One cluster may hold several stages at once. That staggered ripening creates a different harvest pattern from a large slicing tomato. And for a container gardener who likes to pick something often, that can be useful. And this tomato brings us to the most important realization in the entire garden. The best summer container garden is not simply a row of plants that like heat. It is not 18 identical pots filled with the same amount of mix, watered the same way, fed on the same day, and given the same support. Different plants use summer differently. One needs vertical space, one needs stronger branches, one needs a larger root reserve. One needs you to harvest young. One needs a second compatible plant nearby. One needs you to stop ignoring the fruit hidden under the leaves. That is why copying the same routine 18 times rarely creates 18 equally productive plants. Choosing a heat-friendly crop is only step one. The next step is removing the one obstacle that matters most for that crop. From tomato clusters, move toward the pods forming on a cowpea plant. Southern peas, often called cowpeas, are deeply associated with warm season growing and can be a useful container crop when you match the growth habit to your setup. Some cultivars are more bushy, while others can benefit from support. Before planting, decide what kind of harvest you want. Do you plan to pick younger pods for a particular use, harvest fresh peas for shelling, or allow pods to mature for dry peas? The answer affects when you pick and how long pods remain on the plant. It also changes the way you inspect the crop. A gardener waiting for dry peas will read the pod differently from someone looking for a younger harvest. Cowpeas do not need an elaborate ritual. Give them sun, enough container space, drainage, and a sensible watering routine. Avoid pushing excessive leafy growth with heavy feeding. More leaves are not the same as more useful harvest. Let the plant show you its balance. Cowpeas also show why harvest planning affects the visual rhythm of a garden. If you are harvesting fresh peas, you may pick pods in batches as they fill. If you are waiting for dry peas, some pods will remain longer and the plant may look less tidy. Neither approach is wrong. The problem comes when the gardener switches goals halfway through without recognizing that the harvest stage has changed. Label cultivars if you are growing more than one. Pod color, length, and maturity cues can differ, and a simple label saves confusion when vines or branches overlap. In a mixed container garden, good records do not need to be complicated. A plant name and one note about your intended harvest stage can prevent many missed pods. The hidden mistake here is growing the crop without deciding what the harvest is for. When the goal is vague, pods are missed, picked at the wrong stage, or left until the gardener no longer likes the texture. Decide first, then harvest with that goal in mind. Beside the cowpeas, Pattypan squash changes the picture again. The fruit looks like a small flying saucer with scalloped edges, and its shape makes it one of the easiest crops on this list to remember. But beneath the large leaves, a young Pattypan can still hide just as effectively as zucchini. Pattypan is a summer squash, so many of the basic container lessons remain. Enough soil volume, steady moisture, good drainage, and attention to pollination. But the practical emphasis here is harvest timing. Small, tender fruits are often prized for cooking. Leave them hidden under the leaves too long, and they can become much larger and firmer. Make a habit of checking the center and edges of the plant. Lift leaves gently. Look where flowers were attached. A 5-second inspection can prevent the classic surprise of discovering one fruit that has become much larger than the stage you intended to harvest. This is also a good place to stop and talk about water, because hot containers can create a trap. You see wilted leaves, feel a dry surface, and begin watering more often. Soon you are watering by anxiety instead of by observation. More frequent watering and better watering are not always the same thing. A wet surface can fool you just as easily as green leaves can. Push a finger into the mix or use another reliable method to check deeper moisture. Watch how water enters the pot. If the mix has become extremely dry, water may race down gaps at the sides and exit before the center of the root ball is evenly moistened. In that case, slow watering and a second pass may help re-wet the mix more thoroughly. At the same time, do not turn the container into a swamp. Drainage holes must remain open. Roots need oxygen. The goal is not more water as a universal command. The goal is to understand how quickly each container loses moisture and water deeply enough when the plant needs it. Now look down around the base of the next pot, because ground cherries use a completely different harvest signal. These low, spreading relatives of tomatoes produce small fruits inside papery husks. When ripe, the fruit often drops. That can surprise a gardener who has spent years believing dropped fruit always means something went wrong. Here, the ground is part of the harvest zone. Keep the surface around the container reasonably clean. Mulch or another clean layer can make dropped husks easier to see and collect. Check regularly and learn the ripening cues of the cultivar you are growing. A fruit that drops is not automatically ready for the kitchen in exactly the same way every time, but the drop is an important signal that tells you where to look. Ground cherries also reward patience. The plant may not create the dramatic visual mass of a giant zucchini or cucumber vine. The harvest is smaller, hidden, and collected one papery package at a time. But that difference is exactly why a diversified summer garden works. Not every crop has to perform the same job. From the low ground cherry, move back to a trellis filled with cucumber leaves. Cucumbers are familiar, but this is where variety selection becomes critical again. Saying cucumbers like summer is too simple. Some varieties handle heat and disease pressure better than others, and local conditions can make the difference between a vine that continues and one that declines quickly. Look for heat-adapted or regionally appropriate varieties when hot summers are your main challenge. Train vines onto a trellis early. Keep fruit off the ground where possible. Improve visibility and make harvesting easier. A well-organized cucumber vine is easier to read. You can see new flowers, developing fruit, and older cucumbers that need to be removed. Consistent moisture matters. Rapid drying can stress the plant, and irregular conditions can contribute to poor quality fruit. But do not blame every bitter or misshapen cucumber on one cause. Weather, pollination, variety, and plant stress can all play a role. Read the whole plant. Trellis orientation can make a surprising difference in a hot patio. A vine pressed flat against a heat-reflecting wall may experience different afternoon conditions from one growing on an open support with air moving around both sides. You do not need to rebuild the garden, but notice the microclimate you create. Sometimes, moving the support a short distance or training growth toward the open side improves access and reduces the hottest reflected exposure. Check the base of the vine while you harvest. Older leaves may naturally decline, but sudden, widespread yellowing, visible pest damage, or disease symptoms deserve attention early. Remove seriously damaged material only when appropriate and keep tools clean. The goal is not to make the vine look perfect for a photograph. The goal is to keep healthy, productive growth functioning as long as conditions allow. Harvest regularly. A mature yellow cucumber hiding behind the trellis is a reminder that visibility matters. Remove fruits at the stage you want and keep checking. The vine is not a storage shelf. The next vine is even more aggressive. And before you plant it, there is one question more important than whether you have an empty pot. Where will this vine go when it starts climbing? Bitter melon can be a strong, warm season vine, producing textured fruits that look completely different from the smooth cucumbers nearby. Its flavor is distinctive, and not everyone enjoys it. So this is a crop to grow because you actually want to use it, not simply because it can handle warm conditions. Give the vine a strong trellis and a clear route upward. Train early shoots before they wrap around neighboring peppers, tomato cages, and railings. A vigorous vine can turn a tidy container garden into a knot if you ignore it for too long. Harvest stage depends on how you plan to use the fruit. As bitter melon matures, its appearance changes. Learn the stage preferred for your kitchen. The hidden failure here is not that the plant dislikes summer. It is that the gardener underestimates the reach of the vine and loses access to the fruit. Keep the trellis accessible. Do not build a beautiful wall of foliage that you cannot inspect from either side. Summer productivity is only useful when you can reach the harvest. Now, follow the trellis upward until a smaller melon comes into view. Small fruited melons can be a better container choice than giant types when you have limited root volume and a vertical setup. The word small is important, but do not confuse it with easy. Melon vines still need room, a substantial container, and a support system strong enough for both foliage and fruit. If you grow vertically, support developing melons when needed. A simple sling can carry fruit weight without cutting into the vine. The vine may climb upward, but the fruit reminds you that gravity never left the garden. Water consistency is especially important as fruit develops. Do not let the container repeatedly swing from severely dry to soaked. Mulch can help reduce rapid moisture loss, but you still need to observe the pot. Pollination also matters. If flowers appear without developing fruit, look at flower type and pollinator activity before assuming the plant needs more fertilizer. Harvest cues vary by melon type and cultivar. Some slip from the vine when ripe, others change color, aroma, or stem appearance. Learn the cue for the melon you chose. A generic rule is not enough, and if a supported melon seems like a demanding vine, the next plant can build an even larger wall of summer growth. Luffa is often recognized as a sponge, but before it becomes a dry, fibrous object, it is the fruit of a vigorous vine. Young fruits are used as vegetables in many cuisines, while mature fruits are allowed to dry for their fibrous interior. That dual purpose makes Luffa fascinating, but it also means you need to decide what you want from the plant. If you want young edible fruits, harvest timing matters. If you want mature sponge gourds, the fruits stay longer, and the vine needs enough season to bring them to full maturity. Plan the trellis before planting. Luffa can become heavy with vines, leaves, and fruit. A weak decorative support may look fine in spring and fail when the summer growth fills it. Use a strong structure and give the container enough root space. This is not a vine to squeeze into the corner simply because you found an unused pot. The hidden failure is underestimating both season length and plant size. In a short summer, starting too late may not leave enough warm time for mature sponge fruits. In a hot region with a long season, the opposite problem appears. The vine can grow farther than you planned. Know your goal and your season. From the Luffa wall, follow another long fruit hanging in open view. Tromboncino squash is one of those plants that makes a container garden look completely different once the fruits begin to hang. The long, curved squash can be trained vertically on a strong trellis, turning empty air into a dramatic harvest zone. But the support must be real. A flimsy cage designed for a small pepper is not the right structure for a vigorous squash vine carrying long fruit. Secure the trellis, guide the vine, and check ties so they do not cut into stems as growth thickens. Vertical training can help fruits hang straighter, but do not expect every squash to become perfectly shaped. Plants are not manufactured objects. What matters is that the fruit is supported, visible, and harvested at the stage you want. Tromboncino can be used young as a summer squash, while more mature fruits can be allowed to develop for different culinary uses, depending on the cultivar and your purpose. Again, decide what you want before the plant decides for you. If your goal is tender young squash, check often. A vigorous vine can carry fruit out of sight above or behind foliage. The mistake is not always poor growth. Sometimes, it is a successful plant that has outgrown the gardener's attention. And now, after all these unusual vines, come back to the crop that causes some of the strongest summer frustration: the large, slicing tomato. This is where honesty matters. Large fruited tomatoes can struggle to set fruit during periods of sustained high heat, and not every favorite variety will perform the same way in peak summer. The solution is not to pretend there is a tomato that ignores every hot afternoon. The solution is deliberate cultivar selection and realistic timing. If your main goal is large slicing tomatoes during a hot season, look for cultivars described for heat set or warm region performance where appropriate. Use regional recommendations. Pay attention to planting timing. A variety that performs beautifully earlier in the season may slow down during the hottest period, then improve when conditions change. Give the plant a large container, a strong cage, and a stable watering routine. Mulch can reduce rapid surface drying. In very intense climates, thoughtful afternoon protection may help in specific situations. But shade is not a universal command for every tomato in every region. Observe the plant and understand the conditions you are actually growing in. The biggest mistake is expecting your favorite spring tomato variety to behave identically in peak summer. Sometimes the hardest gardening decision is not learning a new technique. It is accepting that your favorite variety may not be the best variety for every part of the season. That does not mean giving up on tomatoes. It means using them more intelligently. A heat-adapted cherry tomato can fill one role. A carefully chosen slicing tomato can fill another. Okra, peppers, beans, squash, cucumbers, melons, and other fruiting crops carry different parts of the harvest. One plant no longer has to carry the entire summer. A diversified planting also changes the way you respond to a difficult week. If one crop pauses during a stretch of extreme weather, the entire garden does not feel empty. Another plant may still be moving toward harvest. That does not eliminate risk, and it does not guarantee food every day. It simply spreads the responsibility across plants with different habits. You can use the same idea when planning next summer. Keep a small note of which containers dried fastest, which supports were too weak, which varieties continued setting fruit, and which harvests your kitchen actually used. Those observations are more valuable than copying a perfect-looking garden from a different climate. Your patio has its own sun angles, wind, reflected heat, and watering rhythm. Build around what you learn there. And that brings us back to the nearly empty basket we started with. Walk through the patio again. This time, the basket does not depend on one tomato plant or one cucumber vine. A young okra pod is ready near the sunny edge. A glossy eggplant is pulling gently against its stake. Peppers are hiding under leaves. A zucchini needs to be cut before it grows beyond the stage you like. Yardlong beans are hanging from the trellis. A tomatillo husk is full. A ground cherry has dropped. A small melon is resting in its sling. The harvest is spread across crops that respond to summer in different ways. That is what makes a hot weather container garden more reliable. Choose plants that fit the season, then learn the one weakness each plant still carries. Watch the flowers before you trust the leaves. Check the root zone before you react. Build support before the fruit becomes heavy. Harvest young crops before they turn tough. Choose varieties for the conditions you actually have, not the season you wish you had. Heat tolerance opens the door. Good container management is what helps flowers become fruit, and fruit reach the basket. Once you stop asking every plant to perform the same way, summer stops looking like the season when the garden shuts down. It becomes a different growing season, with a different group of plants ready to take their turn.